Hello and Assalamu alaikum everyone. Hope you all are doing well. I am with you MD Shajadur Ahmed and I am welcoming you all to a new tutorial in Python programming. And today we are going to discuss about the functions that are available in Python. So let's begin. So what are functions? So in easy word, function is a code segment that does some specific task. So actually function are also some lines of code that is actually grouped together or wrapped together, and then we call the wrapping or call the group as a name, and that name is actually our function. So it takes argument, does some calculation and return result. So as you can see from the example, it first of all takes some arguments, and depending on the arguments it will produce some it will do some calculation thing and then produce some result. Okay. So Python functions. So there are two type of functions, not in only Python but in all other language as well. We all know that built-in function and user-defined function. So what are built-in function? There are in all the languages there are number of built-in function available to make the coding easier. Like in Python there are like print, input, float or end and so on. This kind of function that are called as built-in function, etc. are built-in function. Looking similar, yes, they are we have already used them, and these functions are already implemented in different libraries. Sometimes we need to import those libraries to use these functions. So other than that, if we going to use other functions, so just we need to include them or import them inside our code so that we can use the facility of other function as well. What are the user-defined function? We can write function based on our requirement. We use def keyword to define a function. So it is full form for define. So we use def to define a function. Like as built-in function, we can use the define function in multiple times. So when a particular function is defined by a user, then we can call the function or use the function over and over again. So let us see how to declare a function. So declare or defining a function. A function began with def keywords followed by the function name, a set of parentheses and a colon. So you can see from the example, first of all the def keywords and then the function name followed by the parentheses. You can see the first braces and then separated then the colon thing, and inside the braces we actually put the parameters. So parentheses contain the parameters of the function. If the parentheses are empty, then that means the function does not contain any parameters. So that it means we can also have a function without any parameters. Function may have return statement to return a value. If there are no return statement, then function does not return anything. So we can also have return, or we can sometimes does not include any return, and that particular time it does not return anything to the calling function. Statement after colon with some indentation are considered as function blocks. So you can see these are the indentations. So the function block is starting from here and in here. So these are the function blocks considered as the function block, and Python compiler will read this part as a function and wrap into the sum function. Parameter and all the variable within a function block are local variables. So all the variable we declare inside a function is actually considered as a local variable. So you can see the def function and def keywords used by then the sum function, and a or b are the parameters and c are the return type. So it will return the summation of a and b to the sum function. So let's move forward, and then we are going to see how to call a function. So calling a function. So a function can be called by the function name followed by a set of parentheses. So we can easily call a user defined function by calling by the name of the function followed by the parentheses. So parentheses contain the parameter. So then actually inside the parenthesis we pass the parameter. So there can be different size of parameters, different quantities of parameters, and we just need to put exactly how many parameters we have used during the declaration of the function. As we have seen here that we have used 2 arguments, so that whenever we are trying to call that function, we need to also put inside the parenthesis 2 arguments. So that's why we are actually putting 2 arguments here. If the function has return statement, a variable is used to store the return value. So as we have seen that if there are a return argument, then a variable need to use to store the return value. A function can be called multiple times in a program. In the same way, a single program can have multiple functions. So as we all know, if we need, when we are actually dealing with big problems, then there can be multiple user defined function, and also there can be a same function called multiple times. So here sum followed by parenthesis function does not have any return statements. So you can see there are no return statements, but square followed with parenthesis for function have return statement. So square have a return statement. That's why the return value is have been stored in SQ variable. So the return value will be stored in SQ variable. So let us see a code and how to declare and how to actually call a function. It will be very clear to us. So let's move on to a code. Okay, so as we can see, we are in Colab now, and we have already declared 2 function and called that function. So first of all, we have declared a function named test and used 2 arguments as the function argument, and then actually adding 2 argument and put the value to another variable and then return the value of the variable. Then in another function we are actually using only one argument, and we are actually trying to multiply that argument with itself. So actually we are trying to produce the square of a value and returning the value. So now in line number 10 we are actually calling the test function and also passing 2 arguments as 4 and 5. So a become 4 and b become 5. So that will be added and then produce the result. And in line number 11 we are actually calling the SQU function and passing value 5. So a become 5. So a multiplied by a, that means the square of 5 will be produced, and then we are actually providing the display output of those 2 results. So let us run this code. So as you can see, 4 plus 5 equal to 9, and then 5 square equal to 25. So that's how actually we need to declare a function, and that's how we need to call the function. So we can actually call a function multiple times as we have discussed, and also a code can have multiple functions. So let us go back to the slide. Okay, now let's move on to next. So now different parameter list. So as we have discussed that a function can have null parameter, can have default parameter, and also can have multiple parameters. So the first example is showing that a function which is named as fun are having 4 parameters. So that means a function can have multiple parameters separated by comma. And then in second case we are actually showing that there can be default parameters, that mean parameters value, that means we are actually already assigning value to the parameters, but if the function is called with new value, then the previous value will be overridden. So if actually we are trying to call the function fun, and then we are actually providing 3 values, like first of all integer, and then another one is string, and then another one is float, then this default value will be overridden. So it can also be applicable in Python, and it called as a default parameter value. And then the last one is a function that is without any parameter. So we can also have a function without any parameter. We do not need to pass any value while calling the function. So when we need to call the function from any part of our code, we just don't need to pass any argument, so that still we can actually access the statement available in the particular function. So let us see two example, coding example, so that we can understand how does it works. Okay, so as you can see here, we have defined a function which is called max. So this function, the purpose of the function is actually to find out which is the max value between three values. So we have lay out the statement, and then from here you can see there are three arguments. So that's why we are actually calling the max function as well as passing three arguments, and then trying to find out which are the max value between these three. So we can see in OpenAI that is the 20 will be the max value in first case, and then in second case 50 will be the max value. So let us run the code. So as we can see, in first case it is saying that 20 is the biggest number, and then in second case it is saying that 50 is the biggest number. So that's how multiple parameters works. And now let us see how does a default parameters work. So you can see there is another function called check, and in check we have already assigned 0 to the parameter, and then we are saying if a equal to 0, then print 0. If it is greater than 0, then positive. If it is, or else it is negative. So then we are actually just calling the function, because if it is a default value, then we can also call it without any argument. So in that particular case it will produce the default value. So the default value is 0, so it will consider a as 0. But also in when it is a default parameter, we can also pass the parameter, as we have done here. We are actually passing -4 as a parameter. So now a become -4, and in our particular case if it is -4, then the result should be negative. So let us run this code. So you can see first of all it is saying 0, because we are in first case there will be no parameters, so it will take the default value as the parameter value. But in the next case, second case, we are actually passing a value, and depending on the value the function will produce a result. So that's how the default parameter works. So let us now see a function without a parameter. So you can see there is a function called fun, and there is 0 parameter, that means null parameter. And also the function fun is having a statement. So whenever we are going to call fun function from anywhere of our code, it will trying to execute this print function. So then from here we are outside the boundary of this function, and we are in another function, let's say main function. Then we are printing hello world, and then in this 6 number line we are actually calling the fun function, and because it is without any parameters, so that we are actually not putting any values or any argument inside the parenthesis. So it will move there, and then it will execute all the statement inside the fun function on and on, and then return to here, and then will execute this statement. So as a consequence, first of all we need to display, we will going to display hello world, and then I am Python, then do you love me. So let us run this code. So you can see, as we have discussed, exactly it is executing in at that particular way. So first of all hello world, then it move on to the function, and then execute the statement of the function, which is I am Python, and then it came back to the main function, and then execute the next line. So that's how actually null parameter or a function without parameter works. So let us go back to the slide. So actually we have another 2 topics to be discussed. Those are scope of variables and Python standard library. But as the length of this tutorial becoming too large, so that's why we are actually skipping those 2 topics, and we will discuss about those 2 in our second part. So this is the end of first part. Everyone stay safe, stay home. See you in next part. Till then, Allah Hafiz. Assalamu alaikum.